Okay, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Effectiveness Week with the Marketing Practice, from making marketing activity to more meaningful results. It's been a great week here at the Marketing Practice for Effectiveness Week. We've hosted a series of workshops, events and presentations with a combination of some great industry speakers from the likes of Palo Alto Networks, Verizon Business Group, Marketo, just to name a few. And we've also heard from lots of the marketing practice leaders. So it's been a really great session. We've been exploring really the theme of how we can make marketing mean more, from simply doing more to doing more of what matters. The sessions have covered everything from looking at how you can modernize attribution to data-led creativity, the shift from looking at MQLs, marketing qualified leads, to looking at more account-based strategies. So thank you to everyone that's participated. And if for some reason you haven't been able to make any of the sessions, they're going to be available on demand. So today, myself and Kelly are going to be talking to you about outthinking versus outspending, strategies for optimizing media performance. So Kelly, take it away for introduction.
Hi there, I'm Kelly Felston. I'm our VP of Media here in the US at the Marketing Practice.
And I'm David Hayes, the SVP of Global Strategic Accounts here at the Marketing Practice as well. So what are we talking about today? Well, ultimately, we're talking about something which is very dear to us and something which we are talking to a lot of our clients about at the moment. And it's the reality that increasingly, when we talk about marketing strategies and we talk about B2B, the context of the type of organization that you are and the type of company that we're working with makes a huge difference to the types of effectiveness and strategies that we want to look to employ. Context really is key. Whether you're a large enterprise multinational, or whether you're a fast growth mid-market unicorn, the shape of your organizations makes a huge difference to the types of B2B marketing strategies you're going to want to employ. So the reality is, a lot of organizations have had a lot of success in that upper mid-market space to get to where they are today. They've seen immense growth of their first S-curve of growth, but they typically reach an inflection point when they typically reach around that 500 million mark, where the playbook they've been using to date just starts not to work as effectively and their growth plateaus. And as they chart the course for that next chapter of growth to get to enterprise maturity, it's typically the point where they need to rethink how they're going to market. And this can happen for a variety of reasons, but ultimately, we've put together a point of view that we call outthinking versus outspending the competition. Now, there's a lot of challenges that play into why these dynamics occur at this state of an organization's growth cycle, and it's a combination of internal and marketing challenges. From an internal perspective, typically we see a lot of budgets becoming flat for economic reasons or for the organization's investment strategy. We see a lack of data and analysis to assess effectiveness of the marketing that they're operating. Typically, they might be strained with lack of internal resources or the appropriate tooling that they need. And then they've got the typical business pressures where they're battling short-term focus from the board on a short-term focus on pipeline, while also having to look at the pressure to deliver top-line growth for Wall Street. Now, they're also usually in a space where they've got marketing challenges where they're at that point in their growth cycle where they're coming up against much bigger competitors, the larger multinationals, and that usually comes with being massively outspent from a media point of view. They're also entering into more crowded markets, so standing out in that noisy space becomes incredibly difficult. And then they may also be battling legacy perceptions. The success that got them to where they are might be starting to pivot to their future set of categories that they're looking to build into. So all of these factors make marketing difficult. And as we all know, being a marketer in B2B is hard enough as it is. But if you're operating for one of these organizations, if you're a leader in one of these upper mid-market organizations, the challenges become incredibly difficult on top of that. So we talk about it in this sense of it isn't really about leveling the playing field. It's about changing the game that you're playing. Much like this great example from Ready Player One, sometimes to win the race, you can't go in the same direction as everyone else. You've got to get in the car and you've got to think about how you win differently. And in this case, it was driving backwards on the start line that ultimately led to him having that success. So we've developed a whole playbook, as I mentioned, around this notion and this set of organizations and the dynamics. But today we're going to focus on just a key few foundational elements, which we believe from a media point of view can really start to make a difference to the effectiveness of your go-to-market. The first one is around focusing your investments where they can count the most. The second one is around streamlining your go-to-market. And the third one's going to be around challenging category conventions.
All right, so kicking it off with chapter 1, focusing your investments where it matters most. For this section, we're gonna really take a hard look and focus specifically on how you can focus your paid media investments where it matters most. We know oftentimes this is where we have to be the most critical within our budgets and really focus those budgets on the audiences and the accounts that matter. And this is where we're going to have to be strict and figure out what's going to provide that biggest business impact for your organization. So as marketers, we typically, I would say, have a champagne taste and a beer budget, and we have to really figure out how we're going to leverage those budgets in the smartest way. We're typically going up against larger, maybe more enterprise organizations in the competitive set, and they might have the luxury of really targeting that total addressable market all the time, and we may not be able to do that. But this is where we need to think smart and outthink our competition. So in the media realm and overall, just thinking about your total addressable market, it's critical to start segmenting those audiences down into other high value audiences that are going to help identify the audiences that are going to be the most likely to work towards your business goals. And the biggest thing about this within the paid media space is this is going to help us understand where to allocate those budgets throughout the year and figure out those moments that are going to matter for each of those audiences to figure out where we should spend our dollars. Thankfully, in the paid media space, we have the luxury of leaning into a ton of data and all of our channels capabilities to do a lot of this. So when we're thinking about data and targeting across that customer journey, looking at it from those early signs of intent from organizations and individuals all the way to high intent, it really takes leaning into the power of the data and the power of the platforms, like I mentioned. Looking at the data side of things, I'll pick out a few examples here. Really leaning into intent data. I think a lot of us marry intent data with Bombora, which is great and definitely a rich data set that organizations should always test out within their media mixes. But I think a common thing that individuals and organizations don't always know is that there are dozens and dozens of other intent data solutions out there. And some of those can often marry to different industries or even more of your audiences that you're targeting. In the programmatic realm, we can start testing these data segments across each other relatively easily within programs. So picking out different intent data solution providers and layering those into your campaigns to test, because you might find that golden nugget of some other third-party data source that's really helping progress your accounts and personas across the journey. Another big one here is leaning into the power of AI and the AI that's brought from ABM platforms like your 6 Senses and Demand Bases of the world. Here you have an environment where you can really marry your first-party data with the rich data from those platforms to create predictive segments and understand where your accounts are falling at in that journey and help segment your media campaigns into those different journey stages, making sure you're marrying your message with individuals and accounts that are showing those early signs of intent all the way through high intent and providing them really high value messaging and propositions. Another good example here is leaning into the capabilities of platforms and having a full understanding of what you can do in those platforms. And a good example here is LinkedIn, who is continuously coming out with different data solutions and capabilities using their rich data, which we all know is very accurate in identifying organizations and individuals. So thinking about the targeting capabilities on LinkedIn and how you're going to layer things like their groups targeting, their interest targeting, their intent targeting across that journey as well to qualify your audiences and test within those and allocate budgets where it's really showing that impact for you. A common trend that we've been seeing for about the last 24 months is organizations shifting to more of an account-based approach. And I'm going to show you an example of one of our clients, Reltio, who has really taken that shift and the incredible impact it's brought for their business. So Reltio as an organization did an incredible transformation where they moved from a lead to opportunity view to more of an account-based view, not only in their marketing side, but also their sales side, and really pulling those teams together to have a holistic view at an account-based level. So when Reltio came to us, they'd already made this shift, which was incredible. And what they needed was our help in taking this approach and reflecting that into their paid media channels. When we were creating the account-based media strategy for them, it was really important to ensure we were surrounding all of their accounts, as well as segmenting them into the right segments for them to ensure that we were providing that right messaging and value prop for each of those accounts. So what we did within the paid media space was we took their newly architected funnel that went from suspect all the way down to qualified accounts to pass over to sales. And we segmented our media campaigns along those lines too, creating dynamic segments. So when accounts were moving into those different stages, they were automatically moving into our other media campaigns across LinkedIn and display executions to ensure they were getting that right messaging. On top of that, we layered industries that were the most valuable for them, insurance, financial services, et cetera, and really catered messaging specifically to those industries to ensure that they were receiving very specific industry-based messaging, but also messaging based on where they were at within that funnel. And all of our efforts paid off for them. As you can see here in some of their business results, an incredible increase in pipeline, and a ton of other increases across the sales funnel. Our media efforts didn't obviously only attribute to this. It was a huge effort across their marketing organization and all of their other marketing implementation and channels. But by shifting to this media approach and taking that really targeted approach, optimizing budgets to where it mattered the most, really helped to provide impact year over year for them in this new account-based journey.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. So the second point we wanted to talk to you about is streamlining your go-to-market. I think one of the top topics that we're discussing with CMOs at the moment is how to prove marketing effectiveness from brand through demand, and ultimately being able to demonstrate the value of your largest marketing investment, which is typically your paid media. Now, this is something which is every organization struggles with. So this is not just for an upper mid-market, fast growth organization, but typically an organization in this position has the added complexity of growth changing the shape of their organization. And with that complexity leads to inefficiency. I think this may look familiar to your kind of go-to-market marketing function if you're a CMO or a senior marketing leader, where your marketing team is organized, typically around a brand activation team, a demand generation team, an account-based marketing team, and a partner channel team. And each of these teams typically has their own budget, they have their own teams, and they also, of course, have their own KPIs that they're being measured against. The one element which we see cause the greatest impact across effectiveness is the fact that each of these tend to operate as individual silos. And as we all know, silos are the antithesis of driving inefficiency and ineffectiveness. So it's not uncommon for there to be a brand activation team developing their own campaigns with their own strategy, their own media budget, media plan, and the associated reporting to that. And I think what we're seeing for the organizations that are outthinking the competition is that they're creating as much simplicity as they can in go-to-market. I think when your resources are limited, when your media budget is constrained, the goal is to put as much of your budget and resources into effectiveness and outcomes. And one way that we've seen them consistently do that is by creating this simplicity, by creating one core go-to-market strategy that's organized around one core budget. And where possible, trying to bring some of these teams together so they're not operating in individual silos. This enables them typically to be able to organize a more effective go-to-market that just reduces time inefficiency, it improves communication across the funnel stages, and ultimately enables greater outcomes from the work that they're doing. Now, at the heart of this is to move away from this concept of creating one-off campaigns. I think, as we're all familiar with, it's easy in marketing to feel like success is creating campaigns, multiple campaigns that are targeting different audiences, different industries, different segments, and different stages of the funnel. But ultimately, a lot of that can create busy work and also complexity when it comes to reporting. So the clients that we're seeing out thinking their competition effectively are moving towards this idea of creating a core campaign platform. Because ultimately, if you think about it from a customer's point of view, if you're being targeted with different campaigns, how are we guaranteeing that they're not seeing multiple messages from different parts of your organization at different stages? Because customers ultimately remember stories and think in systems. So whatever you can do to make their journey as straightforward as possible and as consistent as possible, you're going to more efficiently connect up your brand awareness, your reputation building at the top of the funnel where you're creating demand, and then how you're then starting to convert that and connect that down through your demand marketing and capturing it effectively. And we find having that kind of core campaign platform that is able to bridge and scale across your go-to-market creates that efficiency. And typically where we see that start to come into its own is it acts effectively as a bridge between your brand DNA and then ultimately the campaigns that you need to get into market in front of customers. I think it's often easy for a brand to think about having a brand campaign which very much focuses on articulating who that organization is and the impact they make for their customers, and then a separate set of campaigns which get into thought leadership, solution level messaging down through into product and conversion. And then that can often lead to this kind of conflicting worlds of trying to kind of land a longer term brand message while also trying to kind of connect that to more salient time bound campaign messaging. So if you focus on creating campaign systems at the top level where the concept can scale across industries, it can scale across your customers, it can scale across audiences, it enables that flexibility and consistency from a customer point of view. Now, it's easier said than done, of course, but we have a campaign framework that a lot of our clients leverage to try and help create some formalization around this notion where you have a campaign creative platform that incorporates all of the key elements that any good messaging house should include: positioning, value proposition, visual identity, creative concept. But then we're making sure that we kind of, each time we're creating a campaign concept, you've got to simulate it through several tiers if you go to market. Does it work at the top of the funnel? Does it work when you're taking to market a product message? How does it work when sales are leveraging it as part of sales enablement? So we have to run it through these different scenarios to make sure that it's robust and scalable. But again, it can be time bound. It's understandable if a campaign platform may only live for 12 to 24 months. Because the key is you want to make sure there's continuity over that period of engagement with your customers, but you're also making sure that you're keeping it fresh to make sure that it's remaining relevant based on the audiences that you're going after. So here's an example of one of our clients that took this approach of creating a unified campaign platform that they leveraged from everything from their top of funnel, out of home, their TV, their large scale digital campaigns, but then how they then connected that down through the mid funnel and lower funnel to create that continuity for customers. This idea of we get people was something which needed to flow from every single message and customer interaction so that we could make sure that the message was acting as a multiplier when going up against some of the bigger competitors that, in this case, O2 for Business, that we're operating against. And they found from making that shift over the course of 18 months, they were able to move their position from 6th to 2nd in brand consideration. So it goes to show that this model can work. Now, related to this, and from a media effectiveness perspective, I think one of the challenges that CMOs are facing is it's not only proving the value of brand to demand and operationalizing that through a more considered campaign framework or organizational structure, but it's then how do you report on that effectively? Now, I think we're all probably familiar and seen the examples where media reporting comes through as a report and it's based on channel performance at the different funnel stages. And it typically gets difficult to articulate and explain what that actually means in principle, particularly outside of marketing. If you're having this conversation and presenting the impact of marketing to the sales team or up to your board and the CFO, it can make it quite difficult to actually express the effectiveness there across those funnel stages in a way that makes sense to a non-marketer. So this past year or two, we've been moving a lot of our clients to more journey-based reporting, where we as a core connector and silo breaker across your marketing stack will make sure that we can connect up with your teams, the different funnel stages and programs that you're operating into a cohesive journey-based view, so that when we talk about how we're driving C-suite engagement with a particular account, we're able to put this into context so that it makes sense from everything from first engagement at the CXO level through down into account engagements that we've had, right down into what type level of meetings have we generated that have led to opportunities for the sales team to act on. So this is something to think about when you want to more unify your organization and drive that business impact for your board. Okay, so the third one we're going to cover off on is challenging category conventions. Now, I think this is something which in the B2C space, we are all too familiar with in terms of how we think about making sure that we've got the right combination of message, we've got the right strategy for targeting, and then we've got to think about how we most effectively take that to market. And all too often, the media strategy, media plan comes as a reciprocal from a campaign being created. And what B2C does typically better than B2B is making sure that the actual channel strategy is an integral part of development of a campaign. I think we're all probably familiar with our good old Spice guy and the MailChimp campaign, both examples of campaigns where there was a core idea that was executed in the channels where the brands knew their audiences were. In the case of Old Spice, it was heavily executed against Twitter back in the early 2000s when they knew that their core target demographic was there, and they created a conversational element to the relationship to really kind of create that, what we call rapid relevance with their target audiences. And similarly with MailChimp, they were able to, as a technically a B2B brand, start to cut through the noise in their market by playing into cultural trends around how people were leveraging social media and the internet to ultimately build up a more interesting perspective around who this MailChimp brand was, and really leaning into the angle that people were misspelling and mispronunciating what the MailChimp name was. So in both these cases, it was fantastic examples of brands building rapid relevance with their audiences. But like I said, this doesn't happen by accident. If we've got to make sure that the media is a key consideration as part of campaign planning. If you can't just have a strategy for your campaign and then a creative concept. You've got to make sure that media fits squarely into that, so that the audiences that you're building these campaigns around are very much considered from the start, and then layering into that world culture to make sure that you are being relevant with what's going on in their worlds. Ultimately, creating that relevance leads to building trust, and trust builds loyalty, and loyalty effectively drives growth when we think about the types of programs that you're operating.
All right, so we're going to go through a couple of tips that are going to help you achieve some of these goals and to think about more specifically on some of your media strategies. So diving into tip number one, looking beyond typical B2B channels. So this is thinking beyond your table stakes, Google, LinkedIn, content syndication, and while all of those are critical within your campaigns, there are a variety of other channels and types of implementations and executions that organizations should think about, and always ensure that they're considering testing when they're putting campaigns into market. So looking at capturing search intent beyond Google, Google is a great, obviously, table stakes channel that we all need to be in, but often we don't see organizations taking advantage of things like Microsoft Ads or Bing. Bing is a high value channel as well, especially in the B2B space, that can often also create cost efficiencies. So thinking about mirroring some of your Google strategies into Bing can help reach new audiences and do it at a more cost effective way. Testing social channels beyond LinkedIn. So when we think B2B, we typically think LinkedIn. We think our audiences are really, consuming that professional content. We should be there. With innovations in a lot of the platforms and content surrounding a lot of the platforms, testing into channels like X or Twitter and Meta, who also has some strong B2B capabilities and ability to layer even Bombora intent and data segments in there, are often critical to testing within your campaigns. We've also seen some great success for certain clients in the Reddit space, being able to insert ads in Reddit channels where decision makers and even day-to-day users of products are really looking for content very specifically. And having your brand there is something that's important, and in a new channel that's typically somewhat unexpected. Finding niche and relevant industry publications. We often all want to maybe work with the Forbes and the Wall Street Journals of the world, which can often be very expensive. What is not often looked at is smaller niche publications within your space. So whether it's a data and analytics publication or a supply chain, newsletter, making sure we're finding publications that are giving opportunity and different types of media placements to get in is something that should always be tested and considered to get really right in front of those audiences when they're reading content related to the industry specifically. And then another big one is bringing the power of programmatic targeting into new formats. We typically, have display ads always running, but it is very easy within programmatic platforms to apply that same B2B targeting into different formats. So thinking things like connected TV and even out of home placements related to your target accounts and different areas of concentration for things even like events. Tip number 2, don't be afraid to go on the offense. So going against your competitors. So having a always on presence that is conquesting competitors is something that's always important. And there are a variety of different channels and ways to do this. Having competitive search terms obviously is always a big one, and making sure you're bidding and trying to be present when individuals are searching on competitors so that you can make sure you're on top of that, getting in that consideration set, really putting your high value differentiators in there. There's also opportunities for surrounding competitor content. So through the programmatic realm, making sure you are layering your target audiences, but also hitting them in moments that matter when they're maybe reading content related to your competitors is a super high value moment of impact to ensure that you're aligning your brand and those differentiators next to the competitors. Competitive intent data as well, leaning into the power of not only the ABM platforms and competitive data, but other data source providers that have audiences that have that competitive intent and staying in front of them. And then competitor events. This is a big one, which can be also relatively easily done in terms of conquesting competitive events. So it can be on the smaller scale where you're geofencing and serving display ads to individuals who are attending competitive events, and then going as big as taking over billboards surrounding competitive event locations.
Okay, so for the third tip, striving to align activations to your brand values. Now, I think when we think about the outthink versus outspend mindset, this is about creating that rapid relevance that I was just talking about for Old Spice and MailChimp. But it's about how can we create that place where your brand, every time an organization sees or a prospect sees your brand, that moment counts for 10 times what your competitor's message is. And a really effective way of doing that is to align your activations to your brand values and make sure that every activation that you're putting out in front of a customer really ties back exceptionally close to your brand. So just as an example to play this out, it's a customer service based AI organization called Intercom. This is about how can we bring to life their top level brand values of being candid and fearless, and then playing out in a way they're finding the right types of activations which are going to really align closely to their brand pillars. It could be everything from provocative out of home at peak times. How can you, if you're a customer service based organization, really go where your customers are going to be and your customers, whether it be around like Black Friday event, and really playing up and leaning into the angle of where customer service tends to fall down. For this one, it was around acing the basics and getting very close to kind of aligning kind of problems that this brand solves for with an activation that would align closely to that. It could be things like showing up at the DMV, a place notorious for bad customer service, and really having some provocative messaging that's going to kind of resonate both with people coming in there, but just to really kind of create some brand halo around how you're standing up. And this is, again, in their case, aligning to a brand principle around starting good trouble. But it could also be things like how you could most effectively partner yourselves with influencers who have shared values. This is something which I think a lot of B2B brands are starting to think more about, to create that relevance, with the buyer continually getting younger and younger, making sure that, we're looking at how we can effectively leverage not just channels like TikTok and Instagram, but really finding the right people that we can associate ourselves with to create more of a more salience with that brand. And so this is, again, it may not just be about like finding people associated with customer service if that's what your business is, but in this case it was aligning to the brand value of keeping the silly sacred. And someone like Kaby Lane is a perfect example of someone who can have a very irreverent humor connected to a topic close to this brand's heart.
All right, our last and final tip, maximizing the innovations of some of your go-to channels. So thinking about your channels that you're going to consistently be in year over year, your Google, your LinkedIn, your content syndication, really making sure you're staying on top of the capabilities and innovations that are happening in those platforms and testing into new types of tactics and even ad formats. So thinking in the search realm, Google has Performance Max, which is an AI-driven campaign type that can really drive incremental results, and taking some of your budgets and testing campaign types in that Performance Max space could bring incremental results to some of your programs. Also thinking about LinkedIn, constantly having new and different ad formats that they're coming out with that can be more personalized, engagement based. Things like the LinkedIn conversation ads, which really bring your brand into that new space within LinkedIn and allow customers to kind of choose their own journey related to what you're messaging them and some of the value prop that you want to bring them, and giving them options as they kind of navigate through a different ad format type. And things like LinkedIn thought leader ads. This is a huge one in the LinkedIn space, really pushing that content from thought leaders in your industry, and putting some manpower behind that with some of your media budgets and really highlighting those big things specifically to your target audiences as well to make sure they see those things. And then within the lead gen content syndication space, we typically will do kind of your asset downloads and make sure we're kind of filling that pipeline with leads. But a lot of partners in the space are coming out with newer, more engagement-based innovations in that lead gen space, which are going to power you with more data when you're generating leads. So there's a lot of different offerings out there that bring kind of that survey component into that lead gen space, where you're capturing different information about your prospects, which can be used by your sales teams when they're doing their reach outs to have more informed conversations. And then looking at even more high quality and BANT qualified type programs that generate top of the funnel leads all the way through BANT and sales ready leads that can be passed over directly to sales teams. So always good to make sure that you're doing new things in those critical channels that you're always in, because like I said, you can really drive incremental results, and you don't know when you're going to find that really golden nugget of a campaign type that's really going to move the needle for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. So to kind of come back to the start, like where to start, like as we said at the top of this call, it's really hard. B2B marketing is fundamentally difficult, but if you're a fast growth organization where your growth has plateaued, or even frankly, if you're a large enterprise and you're looking for different strategies to kind of look to update your playbook, the reality is that it's difficult. I think both at the organization level, how do you start to shift an organization and your organizations around a different way of going to market? I think it's all too easy to look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant and look at the competitors that sit closest to you, and then do your competitive research to understand what they're doing, and try and in many cases imitate their strategies. And I think the fundamental for us is, and the starting point is to really start with mindset. It's about accepting that to chart that next course of growth, we have to, in many ways, throw out the old playbook and think about and be prepared to get a new playbook, one that is going to help shift the company's mindset around who we are and how we go to market, and to not be as concerned about exactly what our competitors are doing, and really focus on building a new go-to-market engine that aligns to who we are, to our brand values, to our aspirations, our customers' needs, and then really start to build from there, new ways, new strategies, like Kelly was describing, that bring more of an account-centric approach to your go-to-market, so you can really focus your dollars where they need to count. You can start to build new, more simplified campaigns in many ways that are going to really hit at the cultural moments that your customers are looking for, and to really insert yourselves into their lives versus expecting them to come to you. And really that notion down below here of like really starting to not think about level the playing field, but really start to play a different game. When you're that challenger, you do have to think differently. You have to think smarter. You have to make space in your go-to-market plans and your media budgets for being opportunistic, for being entrepreneurial. But at the same time, we also have to be responsible and demonstrate business impact. So I think an integral part of all of this is making sure that you have done the homework and due diligence to understand where you are in the market, what position you're in, and how we think about what kind of budget investment we need to go to grow. And we have several other presentations from this week at Effectiveness Week, which start to talk about the importance of measuring excessive share of voice and the role that plays, particularly for fast growth emergent market innovators, in how they think about transforming. Fortune favors the bold, as my daughter in this case would tell you. I think it is about thinking differently, acting differently, which can be both exciting, it can be scary, but the fact is, it's change is important and inevitable. So don't be afraid to try some different things with your playbook, and you may find your teams are really excited and energized by this. So if you'd like to ask us any questions, we'd love to connect with you either now or later on. We'd also be happy to take you through at a later date our playbook for how we support upper mid-market emerging market innovators without thinking the competition. So please do get in touch. So for now, thank you. I've been David. This is David, and thank you, Kelly. Okay, any questions?
Doesn't look like we have anything open.
Okay, well, if there's no questions for now, please feel free to get in touch. You can find us on LinkedIn. And as we mentioned at the start of this call, the sessions will be recorded from this week, so they'll be available on demand if you want to come back and check out anything. But for now, thank you.